Racing a sailboat requires, among other things, steering it as closely as possible to the wind while not spilling the power generated by the sails, and while remaining alert for shifts in wind direction and speed. Doing so accomplishes the counterintuitive feat of driving a machine against the direction of a prevailing energy field, namely the wind. As such, the title, Sailing Upwind, reflects my approach to my life's work, pushing as closely as possible to the edge of risk while remaining firmly under control and alert to change. I wrote this book because I wanted to pass along what I've learned about problem solving, risk management, and above all, leadership through the lens of the diverse and exciting career through which I was privileged to sail. Serving for 37 years in the U.S. Navy, including 9 extended overseas deployments, exposed me to the full spectrum of military operations and offered plenty of exposure to risks, both physical and mental. The journey began by operating some of the world-class equipment our nation provides to its military. It progressed into leading the young people who employ that equipment. It culminated by providing advice to the highest levels of government regarding whether and where force should be used at all. My service overlapped diverse security issues across several generations, including the Cold War confrontation with the Soviet Union, conflicts with Iran and Iraq in the 1980s and 1990s, post-9/11 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the globe's descent into a post-unipolar era of populism, nationalism, and counter-globalism. In jobs as diverse as instructing at the Navy Fighter Weapons School, or TOPGUN, commanding the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier Enterprise, and serving as the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, I enjoyed a front-row seat to some of the most important events and decisions of our times. I often felt like a juxtaposition of Winston Groom's character Forrest Gump and Herman Wouk's Pug Henry. But there's more to this book than simply telling my story. Somehow along the way, and probably from a slow start, I began to think critically, sailing upwind inside a system that can be reluctant to change. Time after time, I enjoyed the adrenaline rush of helping push some long-standing process in a different and positive direction. In addition to the people with whom I was privileged to serve, this was the most fun part of my career. It was every bit as exhilarating as operating our nation's most complex fighting machines to the edges of their capability. My late father, retired Rear Admiral Jim Winnefeld, picked up on this, telling me in an email just a few months before he passed away that the common characteristics of your career are problem-solving in a rigid institutional environment, and more recently in a fluid political environment. You need to collect your professional growth materials and interpret them in a lifelong context. This is not an ego trip. It's how you teach a new generation of problem solvers. I was also blessed along the way to learn about leadership from extraordinary people. It quickly became apparent that leadership discriminates among excellent, mediocre, and failing organizations. It's true of every other profession, including the military, business, sports, and medicine. I always tried to figure out how good leaders perform well and why poor leaders come up short.